All right, howdy everybody. Welcome to the Watching Privacy Show with Brent and Raju and myself, Tejas. And let's dive right in because there's been a lot this week. So this week in privacy, first up, we got some news about Zoom. I think that was earlier in the week, maybe Monday or so. They got hit with 80-ish million dollar fine for lying to their customer about a few different things. It seems. Did you guys check this out? What do you guys think?
Zoom bombing. I forgot about that phrase, but apparently it should have kept up with that phrase. We know there's always going to be issues when a day like a service just blows up overnight, and that's kind of what happened. But it's the underhanded, the not being upfront thing. I think that's really the biggest issue here.
I think that I agree. I think not being upfront. I think the one that caught my attention is how they're passing information to, I think, Facebook and Google and a few others. While on the other side, they're saying they're private and protecting privacy. I think that is an issue. So every vendor is going to go through this process, and hopefully they fix it before they commit to the customers.
Yeah, in the New York Times article, the data sharing with Facebook, Google, and LinkedIn, I believe, it was like the very last paragraph and like no detail whatsoever almost, which arguably probably is the bigger issue. So, I mean, on the Zoom front, I think there was three main things. There was Zoom bombing, which I think equates to the lack of end-to-end encryption and how that was essentially, they were saying it was end-to-end encrypted, but they were using their own maybe generous definition of what end-to-end encryption really is. And that blew up like last year, and then finally the fine came through now. And then the second half was sharing data through like apps and extensions that people have installed in Zoom, and you don't know. So if I have Zoom and a LinkedIn plugin or something like that, and I have a conversation with Raju's information is at risk or basically exposed, and then is also being shared. So without consent, just through and through. And I mean, I can't really imagine why you would really want to, like, what the added benefit for Zoom is to share this information, short of maybe a revenue stream. But ultimately, like, if you're video conferencing, are you going to tell me that some social data or, I would say profiling information makes the conversation better, gives you better video quality, better audio? I don't think so, but I mean, I could be wrong.
And particularly when Zoom is also being used for events, I think in that context, some of that information will be needed by the marketers. I think those are the ones that will be benefiting from it. I think there is that angle to it, but they probably are, applied to, again, this is me guessing, applied to their entire tech.
What's interesting to me is, so Zoom is proposing you get $15 to $25 for each of these, settlement cases. Is that the equivalent to $10 for your palm print? I don't know.
I mean, one you have to give, and the other one you're forcing or you're volunteering up, right?
Right.
I mean, the Zoom fine, I guess 85 million. Obviously their growth has been wild, but 85 million on, I think, maybe 600 million, 700 million in profit technically. So, I mean, 10% of profit, I think, is a pretty big chunk. But I think when you see, like, we'll talk about in a bit, Amazon got fined $1 billion and Zoom is getting fined 100 million, give or take. It's kind of like not that much, right? And then what goes back to the customer? Maybe $15, $25 if you're lucky, or a subscription for a month. I mean, it's all just a cost of doing business at the end of the day, right? You got nothing to lose and almost everything to gain.
There's so much, things are moving so quickly. And some of the things that just irritate you is that data sharing. It's almost like the backroom data sharing stuff. You can almost vision like these big, the big companies in some room with a lot of smoke and cigars and playing like playing poker or something. And all right, well, yeah, we'll make this deal, but first, here's 4 of a kind. It almost feels like this stuff is going on, and it feels like it's just sort of matter of factly that these folks are doing this stuff behind the scenes. All right, you give me access to your billion records of this. Yeah, we'll give you some of that. Well, it's like this data sharing is too informally done, or has been in the past. And they're sharing so much. It's not just data they're sharing people's, kind of lives. to a certain extent. And it feels like up until this point, it's been so casually done. And now that we're starting to see behind, the getting behind the green rope or something, it's just unbelievable how much has been done and how casually this stuff has been done.
And there is a term for it, and they call them data brokers. And analysts are tracking those data brokers, putting each of these vendors against each other and see who is doing better than others. And it's become an industry in itself. You have to zoom out and look at it and say, what the hell are we doing? Somebody has to do that.
It's like we got away from the fact that this data represents people. It's not just data, and it's not just things that it's almost like you trade them like baseball cards. You got the Nolan Ryan 1973. Well, I got the Steve Carlton 1972. All right, we'll just swap. It's just, I think it's just, it was so easily done, and now that it's coming out to the open, I think we're just at the tip of the iceberg of seeing just how much this was going on and how casually it was going on too.
I mean, I think it's probably just like one of those what do you call, like, growth 101 type things, right? If you're doing business, how can we increase by maybe 5, 10, 20% increase value? Oh, easy. We'll just, figure out a way to monetize the data better or share it more, right? It's arguably, you could be leaving money on the table by not doing it, right? Which is kind of, I think, one of the more problematic things about it in general. But I guess switching gears after the Zoom thing, there was talks of Facebook and WhatsApp being able to serve ads on encrypted messages. And so, long story short, I mean, the WhatsApp had tweeted and said that, this is false. There was a lot of back and forth about how this actually works from a technical perspective. Basically, people were saying that you have an end-to-end encrypted message on either Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp, and Facebook would be able to do some type of technical trickery to decrypt that message, either on the client side, like maybe on the phone itself, and then serve up ads that way. Again, WhatsApp ahead, denied the whole thing and said it's not something they're looking at. A lot of people found like job postings and random things that were in this area, so take it with a grain of salt. But in general, going along with the Zoom thread, I think the concept of end-to-end encryption is becoming a lot more muddy of what actually it is, and we'll get into it a bit with the Apple story because that's been a big one this week as well. But in general, yeah, this Facebook thing, should we be surprised? I guess not really, right? We all kind of
not after that first bit. We should.
And Facebook, you should be expecting anything. Nothing is a surprise with Facebook. And they have a good asset in WhatsApp, and they've been trying to monetize it. They haven't cracked that nut yet. It's a matter of time. But they will figure out, and they will come up with some business model out there, be it advertising, be it something else. Historically, if you look at all instant messaging networks, no company has succeeded in monetizing it well. So we'll have to see if advertising is a monetizing way. I think not, particularly when there are good alternatives like Signal available. I myself seamlessly migrated to Signal, and I forced my friends to migrate as well. So I'm no longer active on WhatsApp. And when there is a credible alternative that takes security and privacy seriously, people will move. I think that is the threat and the balance that WhatsApp has to do. If they enable, let's say, advertising on WhatsApp, expect another wave to move more to alternatives.
One thing too, when you think about looking at the earnings that Facebook put out, I don't know if we talked about this last week or not. We might have. I mean, they just their last quarter, they had 29 billion in revenue and about 10 billion in profit. That's just a quarter. and 98% of their income comes from ads. So I mean, they're basically looking for every way they can to monetize the almost 2 billion daily active users they have. And I think that's just on the Facebook platform. If you look at Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, the whole family, Messenger, I think they're close to like 3 billion daily active users across, their platforms. So monetizing that attention is their ball game. And so that means, for the most part, how do we create ads that get in front of these people as they use any one of our services every day.
And on top of it, as a public company, they're on a treadmill with increasing speed. What I mean by that is every quarter or year over year, they have to keep growing. And that's what the investors want, which means they have to come up with creative ways of making money, which includes maybe running ads off of encrypted messages. And whether they do it or not, but they're going to explore every single avenue out there. And what we are seeing is essentially that.
I mean, the growing year over year is not just growing, it's growing faster too, because you can't have static growth where it's, we grew 20% last year, we're going to grow 20% this year. Then you get hit with the stock issues and it's like, all right, well, they're not growing any faster than they were. Things must be terrible. Let's, punish them and however they do. So yeah, that the treadmill is a good example. On the flip side of the Facebook story, I'm not sure if you guys saw the thing about the ad observer situation. I think it was NYU, if I'm not mistaken, that had NYU Cybersecurity, and basically they had this add-on that people would install, choose willingly, essentially. And what it would do, I believe, is when you look at a website or Facebook.com or whatever, and you get an ad, it will tell you why you got that ad in some generic terms. You showed interest in X, Y, and Z. That's why this ad is coming to you. And basically, people would do that in this ad observer. People would collect all that information that people are opting in to give them, and then use that for research purposes and try to figure stuff out. I didn't go too much into the weeds for it. And then Facebook shuts them down, posts a blog post rebutting them and saying that the FTC, I think, says that they were forced to do it. Then the FTC comes back and says, we never told you to do anything. That's not really what you're doing it on your own kind of thing. And so there's just a lot of back and forth about this. Did y'all go into any deeper weeds on that, or what do you guys think?
Yeah, my initial take was, Facebook doesn't care about its users, but they do care about its customers, that is advertisers. So Ad Observer is not observing users. They're actually observing ads, which is served by their customers. So when somebody targets your customers, Facebook is pissed. And so they take them down. I don't think it is a user privacy related thing, though they know that it sells. And that's the angle they take when it comes to the media positioning. But in reality, they're not happy that their customers are targeted.
Could I make one slight change? They don't care about their users, but they definitely care about their users' data, because that's how they get those customers in the first place, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the differentiation between the customers and users in that sense is, I think, a really big one that probably didn't get as much, or I guess that's not really as much of the story, right? But ultimately, you're right. Like, someone targets your customers, you're going to be upset and rebuttal and make sure that they don't cause an issue, because that ad transparency is going to tell them, all right, cool. Well, Nike, for example, is targeting these metro areas and these demographics and doing X, Y, and Z. Or if you take it to like maybe the political extreme, that could be open up a can of worms. It can go in a lot of different directions once you know why people are getting targeted. And I mean, ultimately, that web information is on the page itself, and the user is opting into it. I think I feel like it was I think it was The Platformer by Casey Newton that had an article about this, but it was basically saying that Facebook is just scared of another Cambridge Analytica situation where people opted into Cambridge Analytica. They said it was a research firm, and then they turned around and had everything that happened with that. And so maybe they're being proactive about it, which, I mean, could be true, and maybe they are super scared about that. But I think what Raju said is probably a little bit more of the truth.
Yeah,
that
word there, people's privacy, is tricky. That is the so it's their customer's business model is being analyzed. That's the reality.
Yeah, there's light being shown on what's been going on for quite some time, and the light is making everything look pretty bad. I don't know how they get around that either. I don't know.
You know what the answer is, right, Brent? It's the metaverse.
I was gonna prop up the Tejas Bill of Rights image. I thought that's where you were going.
No. It's not a metaverse with the image. We'll get something going. But switching gears a little bit, I guess the next big company that has more privacy issues. You hinted at it earlier, Brent. Amazon with the $10 palm prints. The best comment I think I saw about it was if they offered more than $10, then people would get a little suspicious. Like, how valuable is my palm print really? If they're willing to offer me a lot more money, but you keep it low enough where, and I'm sure these guys probably spent hundreds of hours figuring out what the right amount is. Is it $10 and $10, $15, $20, whatever it is? And they're like, all right, people are the least, suspicious at the $10 mark. Let's do that, and then run with it. I mean, I think you guys will probably say the same things, but slippery slope, I assume. What do you guys take from it?
Hey, we already talked about the lasers for watching you sleep, and now they want your. I mean, I'm the biggest shopper on Amazon there is. Some things, you ask for a little bit too much data, and I don't care who it is, whether it's a FANG member or even a small guy. Why do you need certain things? It seems like it's not, if it's not an obvious connection, then it makes you start thinking, well, what's going on here? Why do you need this? Like when you load up an app and the app says we need access to 5 different things. It's like, I'm only putting this app on for this one thing here. I don't know why you need access to all the 10. So you just start getting, why do you need every bit of me at this point? I'm struggling with that. I don't care what the vendor is. When you start asking for a certain thing, it's like, no, I'm not ready to go there yet.
The biometric thing, I think, who should own that? And obviously it is the end user, but if there is another person or another agency, it has to be the government, and government collects that information for other purposes, like when you're applying for a citizenship and things like that. They do collect the biometric information. Should that information be with private companies? That's a fundamental question. I don't think it belongs, particularly when you're putting it in the cloud, and we are still in the early stages, and we are going down this path. It's a very slippery slope, and particularly when it goes beyond the country, it gets really tricky. Will citizens or will another country be comfortable with a company owning the biometric information about their citizens, saving that information in a different country? Where does that come up? So all the walls will start to come up, because it is a slippery slope, and companies are going or crossing the line on what is acceptable.
I mean, it's very possible that Amazon themselves in this situation end up being a data broker for biometrics for these companies. So $10 is a low customer acquisition cost in order to get, ultimately 100% accurate information, essentially, and unique information. You might tie that in with maybe Facebook's facial recognition from photo tagging and stuff like that. 2 and 2 together, you sell that to governments and say, hey, we'll license out, or the Amazon method will be, we'll throw up biometric verification on AWS as a service, go run it over there, and we'll do the image processing and checking and make sure it's real, and you can pay us for it however many times you use it. So slippery slope is 100% right. But I mean, between handprints and facial, it's pretty much all you really need. I just can't imagine why a handprint would be more valuable than me using NFC on my phone, or even facial recognition. I feel like facial recognition you can't really get away with because there's cameras and stuff. But on my biometrics, what do you really do there?
Oh, that's for the checkout and whatnot, especially if they're trying to get rid of the checkout lines and whatnot. I mean, that's another way of authentication. And there'll be some creative ways that will come up. And it's, to some extent, it's scary.
Yeah. I'm glad you
brought this one up. I'm just worried about, you mentioned data brokers. What if you have like a disgruntled employee who has access to this stuff, and for whatever reason, he takes it and sells it on to the black market, data broker black market or something. All of a sudden, like all your face and your palm, there's enough data out there to basically, have you doing all sorts of stuff while you're in your sleep. And, because it's biometric, people are going to think, well, this is legit. I don't know. I mean, once your data is out, once somebody collects it, you don't know what's going to happen to it, even if it's got the best intentions. So some of this stuff you got to feel like you got to be guarded, particularly when it starts getting to the biometrics, like your face, your eyes, your palm. Now your footprint, I'm sure, is coming. I mean, it's got to be. I'm very apprehensive about certain things like that.
I figured it out, Brent. Amazon is building clones. They'll have your face print. They'll have your audio from like all your Echo devices in your house. They'll have your personality based on what you shop and all the other data that they've got on you. They've probably got like your body size from some picture, uploaded an ID somewhere at some point, and then you can just like print people basically and replace the real people with these Amazon bots, and that's what we'll end up with. It doesn't seem that hard.
I'm not even going to
just
limit
mentioned
it to one company.
DNA. Tell me that Amazon doesn't go and either spin up their own 23andMe or pick up 23andMe, and then basically that'll just complete the full circle, and you don't really need anything else. I mean, you got all the pieces together. You might as well put them together, and then those robots will run on AWS.
Let's just say that because you're able to get it, and you might have the best intentions. I'm just worried about somehow a hack, or a leak, or just like I said, a disgruntled employee, and it's out there. You can't get it back. Your palm print can't be changed unless you burn it or something. So there's so many issues around this that when it gets to the biometric stuff, man, it really makes you question a lot of this stuff going on right now.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought this article up too about the drivers. There was a big thing about how Amazon puts these cameras in their cars in order to track driver performance and how they stop and things like that. And I think this is more of I think Amazon got a lot of flack for it, but I think it's an underreported story in a broader sense of just automotive. And maybe we'll do a deeper dive on this in the future. But this is maybe a little bit more advanced way of insurance companies like State Farm and Farmers and Progressive. These guys sell these OBD connectors that you can plug into your car that basically track your fuel economy, how hard do you stop, how hard do you accelerate, how many miles you drive, and then they'll supposedly give you an insurance discount based on all that data you provide to them. But it's an opt-out method. They say that your insurance premium can't go up based on your driving, it can only go down. So either way, they're collecting all that driver information on you by you opting into this program for a potential discount. But then the next level of that is beyond the opt-in. Is Ford, I saw, had some partnerships with, I think, Progressive and maybe a couple other insurance companies where they're basically building in the onboard diagnostics capability to be shared with Allstate or Farmers or something like that, where your card data is basically automatically shared with insurance providers. And of course, the headline from Ford, I think, was something along the lines of, enabling lower insurance premiums, right? And that's the tagline of the sale. But now if you buy a car, the car's 90% electronics now. You don't know what it's connected to and where that information is going out to and what kind of partnerships are happening. So I think the Amazon story about tracking the drivers, I mean, it's definitely bad, but I think people don't even realize what they're into on their own outside of that realm. And arguably that's a little bit worse. At least the driver probably sees the cameras, right? If the chip for sharing data from your Ford is baked in the computer, you would have no idea and nobody would tell you.
I'm just curious to see if they're going to not only have your facial recognition, but say, hey, now that we got your palm, we got to really make sure this is the right guy. What if they got a facial match and a palm mismatch? I mean, wow, that's who knows what's going to happen with that one.
Part of the challenge comes from multiple companies coming from multiple angles with multiple business models. When I, fast forward, say 5-10 years, I really don't see why insurance companies should exist independently. The car companies should have all that information. They should get into the insurance thing, especially when cars get safer and whatnot. Tesla is very much going down that path. I expect them to be ahead on this game. In other words, I don't believe in independent insurance companies or the need for it if the safety and other things are taken care of at the car level. So I think the industry itself will significantly shrink in the next 10 years. That would be my guess. But when we have these insurance companies with multiple intentions and the car companies with a different intention and the data that is shared between them, and who knows what will happen with that data in the interim or when it reaches the destination, and then there is an abuse there. I think once it is combined, the core reason why the data is being collected, and there is only a single company, and you work with the companies you trust.
I don't know. I think we could see some legislation, some anti-competitive stuff in the offing if that happens. Not to say that it's not a good thing, but there's already a lot of legislation kind of in the ether when it comes to, well, at least big tech and all the mergers and acquisitions that are taking place. That would be an interesting one to ponder if a big company started buying up all the insurances and then combining that, their offerings to be able to really do an even more thorough job of creating better products and services for us. But would that be would the government come in and say, wait a minute, we're not having that kind of thing?
I think I'm thinking more like an auto manufacturer offering their own insurance. It's like when you buy an Apple laptop or an iPad, they'll basically sell you whatever Apple Care as an add-on, and that's about it, right? So they guarantee that. So
I mean,
what the big word of that is trust.
There was third-party insurance providers that covered phones and laptops. I remember back in the early days, like when you bought an iPhone from AT&T, they would sell, coverage for an extra $5, $10 a month per phone on your cellular plan, right? And there's no different than Apple taking it over.
Yep.
Well, I guess that's a good point to jump to Apple, because I think that's the deepest story of the week that's really escalated in the past couple of days. So Apple came out with this thing. They partnered with this institute. What do you call it? This institute creates has a database of images, and they basically hash all these images. And Apple says that they'll take that database of hashes, keep it on your phone locally, check every single photo you upload to iCloud and every single message that comes in and out. If you have a child account, there are some stipulations and stuff in there. Check if it's child pornography, basically, or any kind of child abuse imagery, and then it can report it, or I guess take some actions or something along those lines. At the surface, sounds great. Protect the children. It's all a good thing. Obviously, there's a lot under this iceberg. What do y'all want to tap into that topic?
Yeah, the thing that comes to mind is, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And that's true very much in this case, or maybe even Amazon's case in the previous story. This is a slippery slope. Now, it starts with photos and whatnot. And remember, just like Amazon, Apple has a lot of biometric data. Facial data. Well, your Photos app has something called People, which is essentially facial recognition. They've been doing it for years. On top of it, there's a Face ID that has very good detailed information about that biometric. Of course, there's a thumbprint where you have your Touch ID. So Apple has a lot of the biometric information. So the next phase to this is maybe identifying criminals. Well, that goes in there. Then biometric. Well, you found some thumbprint somewhere. Well, go to that data. Now add that to AirTags. We discussed this one of the previous episodes. Between AirTags, which is a surveillance network, and this combined with a few of those, that's that is where when we discussed about AirTags in one of the previous episodes, I said, how will a 5.0 version of AirTag release will look? How comprehensive it get? And if you combine all of these together, this is a comprehensive surveillance network out there. And that is going to get worse. I mean, it is used for this purposes now, but what are the things that it'll open up? And it's a scary thing. And I should say, last couple of moves, this one and also AirTag, the privacy angle that Apple is playing up is no longer resonating with me. I thought Apple is a privacy-centric vendor, but some of the recent moves are making me question their intention and their interest in this market. Are they using? Now I'm starting to question if they're using privacy as a marketing angle, or are they really caring about users' privacy?
Wow. Yeah, remember at the end of last year when all the talk was about the iOS 14.5 update and how that's kind of a big step in the move to protect data privacy and then things they're doing around the emails, and like everything was great, and then you get a story like this and it's like, well, damn, I mean, what are we supposed to think now? I mean, it's And just think about what we talked about today and even last week. So we had a big Facebook story. We had a couple of big Amazon stories. We talked about Google a lot, about the 9 billion person user services they have and the data being collected there. And we got this. I mean, this is like maybe a more broader perspective, but it feels like to me that even when maybe you try to do something good, the natural pull from years of doing the backroom data deals, it's kind of hard. It's almost like we are talking about addicts here when we're talking about how companies have become addicted to this data, and there's even more attractive data to be had because these devices are now creating reams of it, as opposed to when we used to have to like click and type stuff. Now we just have to be in a room where the devices are and data just starts flowing. It feels like this addiction is going to be harder to break than even maybe they think, because it's just so valuable and their models kind of depend on it. I don't know. This is just a really bad example.
And when a company like Apple starts to do it, whose primary business model is not based on ad, then what happens with companies whose intention or whose business model is based on ads? It's a license to surveil. That is what it screams. When a vendor like Apple does it, then it becomes an open season.
Yeah, I mean, the extension of the Apple story as well is, I think in the States we might be a little bit luckier, but imagine like more maybe emerging countries or countries with a lot more government control. If you basically are just saying that I can put a list or a database of hash files on a device locally and then check that hash file and filter information or send alerts automatically, you're just opening the door wide open. If maybe China, maybe Russia, maybe India, maybe other countries, Belarus had a big problem, Brazil, anyone with like, I would say arguably questionable governments or, anything fueled in like political issues, China just comes in and says, hey, look, like let's put our own list there. And if you don't do it, you can't sell iPhones here, right? Because now like that before I was listening to the Verge podcast this morning, and they had a really good line. Like before it was like an encryption wall, and now it's like a door. Like the wall you thought was like locked and like in place, but now the door is there. The door might be closed, but you know that there's a door and information can go in and out. And essentially that door is just evolving into a revolving door, where it's just going to be spinning because there's no real stopping it. You're just showing that you've exposed a spot in this supposedly fortress of encryption and safety of information, right? So that's a lot slipperier slope, right? And then I think obviously in how crazy political stuff is going right now, that's another area of I guess big contention, right? And honestly, like I think to me the most confusing thing is the child pornography problem huge and bad and terrible, and everybody uniformly across the spectrum says that this is a bad thing and we should try something to stop it. But like, I don't know if anybody at Apple was like, is this our burden to take on? Is this us, is that even, it seems like almost like bad business practice to me. Like you're sticking your nose where something probably shouldn't be. And it doesn't really, there's minimal upside. Am I going to go buy an iPhone because maybe my kid is going to be a little bit more protected? Possibly not. I don't know. It just seems like the whole thing was, there's got to be some 4D chess going on here, because I don't really see the reason for doubling down into this initiative unless there's some longer play at part. But good intentions alone can't be it, right?
There are two aspects, right? One is, there's one thing when you have all the data uploaded into iCloud and scanning that information and or through iMessages. That's one part. But the crazier part to me is when you do not upload any of your photos to the cloud. Like I do not upload my photos to iCloud or any of these. But even those photos at the client side using the device are being scanned and reported. So where does this end? So you purchase the device, but really all of these things are being inserted and collected from the client side and reported back. So that part, that concept is crazy. Tomorrow, what else is being analyzed? It's like every single photo being analyzed on even though that information is not uploaded to the cloud and sent back. That concept is a little scary, and that is what is maddening about this.
I just want to go back to something Raju said about if Apple is doing this. They announced their earnings not too long ago. Last quarter, they made, I believe, somewhere in the neighborhood of $81 billion in revenue just for a quarter, and about 21 billion in profit. And the vast majority of that, I mean, the significantly vast majority was selling products, and some services, but mostly products. These devices, people are going crazy because of the new M1 chips that they created. So their whole product line is being refreshed. And, I'm sure I'm not alone. I'm wearing my new AirPod Max, and I got my new Mac Mini on the M1 chip, and I can't wait till they come out with the new MacBook Pro with the so they are making so much money and profit every quarter, and it has really nothing to do with data and selling data. So, this is one of those moves. Like, why? I don't. Is it because they think it's a net good thing for customer privacy? But there's so many. It's like a high wire act, I think, with them, and one foul step, one wrong step, and we all know what happens.
Yeah, to the Apple defense, though, I think it is for like accounts managed or children's accounts managed by parents, and there are some it's not like every adult or every account is automatically into this system. I think there are some controls in place, but generally speaking, that control it's a server-side control that could arbitrarily be lifted or not, and you would have no idea. So, kind of a moot point, but I have heard that as like a level of pushback on that topic.
Because we have that reaction partly because when we have seen vendors abuse this again and again and again, we lost the trust on these vendors. And when someone like Apple does it, we think, yeah, here we go again. Because in the name of change in terms and services, terms and conditions, and we have updated our terms and conditions thing. How many times have we received that email, right? And companies keep tweaking that, and now it is Apple's turn. So I think because we are so tired of it, we are now seeing it with a magnified lens, but not a welcome change.
One thing maybe to point out, maybe I think they do go into this stuff with good intentions. It's just when you look holistically and you look at all the different companies and all the kind of data they're collected in, and then dealing, there's too many opportunities for brokers and leakers to come in. Just think about, remember I want to pop this up because we shared this, and Raju, you asked each of us to check this out and put your address stuff. So I put my address in, my current address, and all sorts of stuff popped up, and it's all, publicly available apparently. And then I put, well, damn, it's got, what if I put the address that I grew up in? And my goodness, I think this is even more telling. So every person that ever lived in that house, their information is in it. All their address, their age, their phone numbers, people that have passed away. There's still, so you got that already out there, and now the potential for each of these companies who might have the greatest of intentions, but we all know that this stuff kind of leaks out. There's so much information that can then be married with biometrics and palm prints and face scans. They could just have your eyes, and then next thing you know, they've got your whole history, because a lot of this is already public. That's kind of the scary thing for me, I think.
And I think that is where you're gonna get into it, where apart from listing your historical phone numbers and addresses, and your audio clips are going to be there, Brent, and so are going to be your stores you visit, and maybe you can download your biometric data. So that's where we're headed.
technically this conversation going on YouTube and LinkedIn is probably not in our best interest. We gotta find like a privacy platform to host videos better.
Yeah, we're streaming on LinkedIn and Twitter and YouTube and Facebook. So we're all screwed right now.
But that site that you pulled up, Brent, if anything, we should give people like homework for the week. Fastpeoplesearch.com is one that aggregates a lot of information. And yeah, I mean, I put in my address in here. It connected it to my name and everything, and then it connected me to like my parents and my cousins and my aunts and uncles, everybody who pretty much my family knows here in the States. And then it found like my parents' house that I grew up in, 30 years ago. That house was there, which is weird because I haven't seen the house in a long time. So then I went on Zillow and like, oh, this looks familiar. I didn't know someone remodeled it after 30 years.
And Zillow had all the information too on the house, all the rooms and square footage.
Speaking of Zillow, when we were going through this, we looked up the White House on Zillow too, and apparently that's available, and it has like a Z estimate for rent and things like that. But yeah, this tool, I think
it had with Abraham Lincoln, what years he lived there, his phone number.
But this this site, fastpeoplesearch.com, I think everybody should take 2 minutes, put their name or address or phone number in there, and figure out what's there. And one of these days, probably in the coming weeks, we'll do a deep dive on kind of how to really maintain what information is available through these data brokers and stuff like that. There's a lot of websites out there that basically post public information about you, and you have to go through either some paid services that will do that kind of removal request for you, or you have to manually go through very, I would say, time-consuming and painful processes of requesting your information to come down either through emails or phone calls or support tickets, and it takes a long time to verify information, and it's a mess. But at least right now, looking it up here on your own, will give you some sense of, I would say, your exposure, and then hopefully that'll open up your eyes a lot more, and then we'll talk about how to fix it in the future. But everybody should definitely go to fastpeoplesearch.com. I hope they appreciate us driving traffic to their site, and I hope people kind of see how crazy it can be. Because I've seen a lot of these kind of address lookup and phone number lookup sites, and this one is definitely the craziest one that I've ever seen. Other ones, show bits and pieces of information. They'll redact some stuff. These people have like my parents' home phone number from like the early 90s, like listed in there. And it's like, how are you, even before things were getting that digitized, was still being tracked and associated to people, right? So that kind of shows how scary it is. Brent, you were talking about your family house, like, I don't want to age you, but I feel like the beard does a little bit of its own. That's also maybe pre-digitization of a lot of this information.
Oh man, you're just going for it. Is it because I showed the Bill of Rights image again? Right. No,
told you I'd get you. I told you I'd get you.
my family house was built in '64, and I think we were the first persons. We're actually the only people to ever own that house. So it literally had every one of us. And had my nieces and nephews and I mean almost every visitor that came to the house is like, yeah, we got you too. And just think, this reverse address look, eventually they're gonna put up you see name, phone, and address. You're gonna put your palm, your eyes, so you can just look at it, and all of a sudden all this data is gonna start. We're at the beginning of this, and it's really it's gonna be interesting to see how all of this plays out. You got the big players, and you got sites like this, the aggregators and the data brokers. We got a lot to watch over the years.
Remember, there is a reverse address lookup, right? But there's also reverse IP lookup, because the IP address the request is coming from, which means wherever if you're browsing, they know the IP. And there is a story this week about some DNS compromise, right? It's easy to map your IP address, or at least in some cases with an address. Now, one of my friends several years back said, he works at a pharmaceutical company. He said, you can just Google, let's say, a name of a drug, or just say you have maybe headache or something, or some problem. All you need to do is Google that, and then the pharmaceutical companies can technically deliver that drug to your house. You don't have to provide them any information. So it is basically IP to address, and then address to your entire history, your 50-year history is all right there.
Oh my
And
God.
and he was right. That was 5+ years back. It's just that we are learning about it now, but companies have been ahead of this for a long time.
Yeah, that's big. We're close to about the 45-minute mark. We had a topic to really dive deep into, but I think This Week in Privacy was just so terrible that it took the entire 45 minutes to talk about everything bad that happened this week. So we'll just table that talk and put it in the bank for a future week. But thanks for joining. Always appreciate it. Thank you, Brent and Raju, for your time. We'll be back next Friday, same time. What's it, 10 Central, 11 Eastern, 8 in the morning Pacific time. So wake up bright and early. And look forward to talking again. See you guys soon. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.